All right, I'd like to open the, okay. I'd like to open the December 3rd meeting of the Westborough Planning Board. I'm Hazel Nurse, the chairman. To my far left is Jenny Goodgris, our town planner, Christina Kelleher, John Pizzoni, Mark Silverberg, John Gelsich, and to my far right is our administrative assistant, Dirk Bolito. The first matter on the agenda is an A&R for Old Colony.
We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me better now?
To the mic, please. Okay.
Okay. The first matter on the agenda is an A&R for Old Colony and West Main Street. Is someone here for that? If you could introduce yourself and please spell your name and speak clearly because we're TV and people cannot hear often.
Good evening. My name is Joe Marquidant, M-A-R-Q-U-E-D-A-N-T. I'm here on behalf of Russell Phipps. My firm prepared the plan that's over your shoulder now. Russ has owned the two parcels that are approximately 8 Old Colony Drive. A small triangle, parcel ID 15-34, 0.04 acres, and 15-35, the 3.3 acres adjacent to that northerly of the smaller parcel. Russ would like to market these two parcels, this property, and to achieve that, we needed to apply for and receive a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals for insufficient frontage. We have 80.28 feet along Old Colony Drive. They granted that variance to us back in September. The conditions on that variance included a submission of an A&R plan to this board, combining those two parcels into one, and then a notation on that plan of the recording information for that variance. That information is included in the notes for this plan. We took the opportunity to add to this plan some restrictive easements. As based on discussions with the Board of Appeals, we have set aside some areas where no structures can be built, where no trees can be cut, and where an area of limited tree clearing can take place. So we added that to that plan so that any potential buyer would be aware of the ground rules from day one. So in summary, to satisfy the Board of Appeals condition, we have an A&R before you folks that incorporates the 1964 and 65 plans and some abutting plans, makes note of the variance received and the recording of that variance, and outlines the boundaries of some easements.
Okay. Are there any questions from any member of the board? Christina?
No questions.
John?
Nothing for me.
Mark?
Yeah, I'm a little confused by the boundaries. You have this dark outline, but that doesn't include the small triangular parcel that's being...
Yeah, if you could see that up close, that's a symbol for a stone wall. The 3.3 acre parcel in the rear is entirely ringed by farmer stone walls.
Okay, so the dark boundary is a stone wall.
Yeah, a series of ellipses that make up a stone wall.
That's where my confusion came in. So a portion of that stone wall be removed at some point if the house is, if the parcel's built on?
Right, they'll have to get a driveway in from Old Colony, so a small portion will have to be relocated.
Okay, all right. I think that was my only question. Thanks.
John?
No questions.
I had no questions also. Could I have a motion to approve the A&R as shown on this plan?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for your time.
All right, thank you. The second matter on the agenda was an application from Steve Nicasa for lot releases for Ridings 2, which is a subdivision, looking for additional lot releases. We visited this site last week to take a look, particularly at the problems that had occurred there, which had to do with storm water drainage and also with erosion problems on a back hill. I don't believe anyone's here representing the ridings tonight, but there have been numerous discussions between the town planner, the engineer, and the conservation department concerning this piece of property, and we have a recommended motion on this. John? Oh.
Would you like me
Any
to make the
questions?
motion?
Yeah, right, I will just say. Are there any questions from the board on this, since we all visited it?
I did have one quick question. Jenny, the lots that have already been released, are those not going to get occupancy permits until those slopes are stabilized?
Yeah, so,
That's something we should be asking the building commissioner.
no, we have had that discussion with the building commissioner, engineering, and conservation. The certificates of occupancy are a separate matter, and there are multiple deficiencies that need to be taken care of before we can sign off on them. There is the ability for additional bond to be posted of $5,000 that was included in the planning board condition in case the vegetation didn't come in. So we would be asking the applicant to post that additional $5,000 per lot. And there's other items as well, such as the detention basin. We need to have a plan for how to fix that essentially. And then the slopes. There's also an issue right now with the driveway slope. It's off from what the approved plan was, and it's off from what our regulations allow for. So for those, he will be coming to the planning board for a waiver.
I guess my question, though, is if we grant occupancy, then he'll transfer the lots to the buyers, or the houses to the buyers. Is he going to have access to stabilize those slopes once those houses actually transfer?
We have
Title.
asked for him to put in the purchase and sale agreement that he must have access to be able to finish stabilizing those slopes and make any modifications.
Okay. And does our bond cover those slopes, or is that I know you said there's an additional $5,000, is that?
Yes, the bond covers the,
Okay, all right, that's all.
Does it also cover the stormwater
yes.
basin? So there's been a decision that that will be adequate if there's any problems as far as the stabilization goes or the stormwater basin?
I mean, I can't speak for whether it will be adequate. I think we'll have to find out what he proposes to, or how to fix it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
John Gilsett, do you have any?
No questions.
Okay. Could I have a motion?
I move that the planning board deny the request for additional lot releases for the Ridings 2 subdivision with the condition that no additional lot releases shall be considered until the following condition is met. It is agreed by the DPW engineering, conservation, building, and planning staff that the first 6 lots, lots 27, 29, 31, 33, 35, and 37, are fully stabilized. The stormwater infrastructure is functioning as designed and in full compliance with the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook standards, and the project is in full compliance with the planning board decision, Conservation Commission order of conditions, stormwater permit, and the project's stormwater operation and maintenance manual, which includes the SWIP.
Okay. Could I have a second?
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. I would suggest we get an update on this in approximately 2.5 to 3 months from the 3 departments, just to see whether there's any progress on it, so we keep track of what's going on.
Absolutely, and he will need to come in front of the board to get a waiver to the driveway slopes. He's hoping for the second December meeting so that the homeowners can close on the property prior to the holidays. But I think that'll be a discussion we can have on the hearing date.
Okay, what was the date you just suggested, the 17th?
December 17th is our next meeting date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so he's hoping to close lots prior to the end of the year?
Correct, but there are still multiple items aside from the driveway. That's not the only thing. So it's hard to say whether, that would be sufficient, that just receiving the waivers would be sufficient to be able to close or receive the certificate of occupancy then to be able to close.
All right, I suppose it's up to the building department is whether they grant COs on it.
Right, well, they're also looking for feedback, and he would have to meet the conditions of the planning board decision, and he's not.
Okay.
So would he have to reopen the hearing,
No,
grant the waivers, and then amend the special permit?
I don't think so. I think it's a de minimis modification that the board can, you can decide whether it's a de minimis modification.
Okay, thank you. And Jenny, I think, try to speak more into the
Oh, okay.
thing, because I don't think people can hear. Thank you. All right, our third matter on the agenda is the continuation of the public hearing for special permit site plan review application for 210 Turnpike Road.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
Didn't get the dog. Dog got mine.
Okay. Good evening. For the record, again, Sam Malafronte, last name Malafronte, with Solely Engineering, offices at 11 Vanderbilt Ave in Norwood, Mass. So since we were before you a couple weeks ago prior to the holiday, we have submitted a updated site plan. It wasn't a comprehensive plan set, it was just a site plan for discussion purposes. I did have a chance to revise it, take into account a lot of the comments I heard a couple weeks ago. I wanted to discuss it with the planning board as well as kind of bring the board up to speed. We had a meeting with town staff regarding the B-Walt as well as like easements and potential relocation to the B-Walt and how it affected the property. And I just wanted to kind of discuss that so it was clear, because I don't think we really got into that too much at the previous hearing. And then at the end of the hearing, at the end of this presentation, we will be requesting a continuation to the January meeting, just because the peer review, I think they said in their proposal it's going to be about 3 weeks. And then with the holidays at the end of the month, I don't think it'd be wise for us to, I think we'll be in a better place in January. So I can go through, there was a couple things that were left out of the presentation a few weeks ago, and I think they kind of got overlooked a little bit. I did want to reiterate that in existing conditions, the site has 3 driveways off Park Street, and the furthest north driveway is roughly 94 feet from the curb line of Route 9. The reason I bring this up is just, you'll see in the modified plan, which I can show now, we are relocating the driveway even further south down Park Street. The zoning regulations require the driveway to be a minimum of 20 feet from adjoining property lines. So that's kind of the reasoning. We're about 20.5 feet to the north of the southerly property line. And that's on the curb return. So we can't really push it any further south. But that was something that we did look into, and reducing from 3 existing driveways to 1, and increasing the distance from 94 feet to 235 feet is a significant improvement that I think got overlooked a little bit. I'm not sure if I even brought it up at the initial hearing. So I did want to bring that up. The revised site plan also, so a couple things. We did hear various board members bring up the concerns regarding the sidewalk and additional signage and pavement markings throughout the site. So this plan, the goal of this was to kind of alleviate those concerns. So we are proposing a sidewalk along the existing building, crosswalks to the parking, pavement arrows throughout, and then the modified driveway. It was discussed that we were looking for a wider driveway with some sort of middle kind of bisected island. We didn't accommodate with a curbed island. That is a striped island, so it's a yellow striping. And that's to accommodate the turning radius of larger delivery vehicles and trash trucks and fire trucks as well. But that's kind of the gist of what the revised site plan is. We do anticipate to submit full civil plans at the end of this week that address this revised plan, as well as address the comments we've received from the stormwater peer review and site peer review, that they had quite a bit of comments on the notes and details of the drawings. So we're working through those to get revised plans.
Can you just go through the change as far as the driveways go with your pointer and show people how you've made the revisions?
Yeah, I want. So it might be easier. I have it in here. So
Okay.
this was the original layout of the drive. Oh, no, it wasn't. Excuse me. I have the rendering. So when we came before you 3 or 4 weeks ago, the driveway was proposed. I don't have a distance, but it was, I could get that. It was some distance north of where it's currently proposed. You can see basically it's in line with the parking spaces, the spine to the south. So now it's going to be proposed a little bit further south. So previously it was kind of in line here. Now it's about, I would estimate 25 feet further south. And I know that the sketch that you had provided, you mentioned potentially breaking the driveways up. The zoning bylaws actually don't allow a driveway any closer to that property line. I think it's 20 feet if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
So we're at 20.5 on the curb return here. So that's about as far south as we could put the driveway. It does still, the entrance lane does still align with the driveway, the residential driveway across Park Street. So we were considering that as well. Having driveways aligned is always something from a design standpoint you're trying to achieve. Does that answer your question?
So you have one driveway there,
One driveway, so it's a 20-foot wide access
but
lane.
much further south, and therefore allowing people that are going to the office building essentially to not have to cut across the line of traffic that's in a waiting period. Plus, it also allows easier access for the trucks and people going to the other business down in the back there.
Correct. And we did kind of open this area up a little bit. It was a little restricted. So this drive aisle now is 33 feet wide. So it allows for several movements. And the applicant and I, we talked through this quite a bit actually, because the layout of this drive, now it makes sense that vehicles exiting the drive-through, the easiest way to get out of the site is to actually utilize this southern drive, because the exit is kind of aligned with that. Now, that's not to say that vehicles won't exit utilizing that middle drive either. But it certainly provides enough maneuverability and traffic flow. We are adding a curb line down here, which this area will be landscaped. But that was the goal, to kind of help achieve that.
Okay.
And then I could go, if there's no other questions, I could go into the B-wall and just talk through that.
Are there any questions on the driveways? Mark, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so you have, I know you said that people are likely to use the southerly exit, but you also have kind of a west to east aisle in the middle, and
Have a seat here. Yep.
and then you have that island where it almost seems like you'll have a log jam with some cars exiting through the middle aisle and some cars exiting through the southerly aisle and meeting at the one exit. I don't know if it's possible to direct all the cars exiting to the southerly aisle. I don't know if you could. I'm also worried that cars coming in will have difficulty making almost a U-turn to the right, particularly if a car is exiting from that central aisle. I know when at the other Starbucks, and again, this is a much different site, but the other Starbucks, there's an island there that forces all the traffic coming in to turn right. Is it possible to move that island further east to force all cars entering, coming, to actually make the U-turn?
So it's like a one-way entrance and exit?
Well,
I mean, you
and
could,
I understand there's another building here too, so I don't necessarily,
And I could talk, so we did look, I did an iteration that was kind of like a right-in, exit-only drive, you know what I mean? Like a,
Right.
with an island kind of in this look. I think that's what you're talking on,
Right.
speaking on. The only downfall of that is, so first of all, if it was one-way configuration, it would all have to be angled spaces, which reduces the overall parking count. If you were
you're over
to,
in the parking count anyway.
right.
Yeah.
If we were to make this, maintain this as a two-way drive aisle, any vehicles that came down this would actually have to circulate the site. Like if this wasn't if there was no way to exit this over here, you would have to circulate the site utilizing the bypass. So it kind of got a little, maintaining like the traffic flows for the other business as well. It did get a little, we did look at that. We could certainly look at potentially maybe modifying this a little bit to help alleviate those concerns, but there's sufficient space, and it's actually wider than a typical drive aisle for any commercial site, I'm sure, in town. It's greater than 24 feet.
Couldn't you have as people come out on the left-hand side of that island there, in other words, not cross the traffic coming in? So in other words, will you put that island which says 8, 9?
You have this island here?
And have them, have an exit, they have to turn right and pick up the driveway there.
couldn't
So
you
you
have
kind of
that,
put the island in the middle of that drive aisle?
well, couldn't you have that central aisle be one way to the west? And make everybody turn right to come out the southerly aisle? I mean, I understand that that's,
It certainly, I mean, we certainly could. I will say this, the layout of this is fairly consistent with typical commercial developments.
right.
And it's in conformance with the site plan review standards as well, from a width, circulation, drive aisle standpoint. I think it was brought up that the site is overparked, and I believe one of the comment letters from residents mentioned this, and it was brought up by the chairperson as well. A large portion of the parking spaces are behind the building. So eliminating parking out in front of the building is not really something the applicant wants to really explore, just because the angled spaces, it does reduce. I think it dropped this kind of island to 11 or 12 total spaces when you do 60-degree spaces, which is what you need. You don't want anyone backing out 90 degrees and then kind of being confused on a one-way.
I would be hesitant to block off any access points and, force driving in a certain direction because I don't think it's going to be a super busy site. I think it's going to be busy during certain periods of time. And even then, probably not super busy after the first few months. But if we start blocking off parking areas, it's going to be a nightmare for people trying to turn around or back out of spaces or go through those. And having more access points to circulate around the parking lot, I think will help alleviate those issues.
Yeah, again, it does have more space than the other one, but I found that at the other Starbucks in town, the two-way traffic tended to be what caused the problems. In particular, because you had cars entering the queue in one direction and the traffic, the two-way traffic was kind of opposing that queue. So I think it'll work better on this site, but
And if I could, you mentioned the turning, kind of like the U-turn movement. So you can see the property line kind of runs at an angle. So the further south the driveway is, it actually improves that turning movement. The fire truck, the largest fire truck, the ladder truck, and then the dumpster truck have no issue making that U-turn movement coming south on Park, and then, which those are the turning and cramp angle for those is a lot tighter than like a truck or a larger pedestrian vehicle. Just to.
These parking spaces are out.
all right, I'm good with that.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I can go to the B Walt.
You just mean on the lot, and this part of the lot
Yeah.
specifically? Yep,
Yeah.
okay. No questions for me.
More questions on
Sorry,
this
are there any
part?
more questions on the parking? Christina, you had a question?
No, none for me.
Is the parking going to be reviewed by the engineer? Parking circulation, all that kind of stuff? Or is it just going to be a traffic review for access onto the roads?
Yeah, the parking was reviewed as part of the peer review as well.
All right, if there are no more questions, you can move on to the B Walt.
Okay. So we had a lengthy meeting a few weeks ago with Jenny, the conservation director, DPW director, as well as the town's consultant. There might have been a couple other people there as well, discussing the B-Walt in relation to this property. And it was nice to get a little bit of an understanding on the B-Walt from the town's consultant, because I know they've been working on this for quite some time. So the 25% design had the B-Walt kind of running where it's shown here. It just ran straight down the property. After discussion on the B-Walt, and there were several alternatives kind of discussed at that meeting, we looked at potentially running it at the rear of the site and then kind of looping the southerly property line. It was preliminarily determined that just having it kind of bow out in proximity to the coffee shop was the town's preferred layout for the B-Walt. And this kind of allows the development, and it gives a more separation from the drive-through lane, the bypass lane. But it obviously does require some easements on the property of 210 Turnpike, as well as connectivity is proposed kind of across the drive-through lane here. We have crosswalk signs as well as a crosswalk, and it will allow pedestrians to kind of access the bike racks that are located here very easily. And the owner, applicant, as well as the town, I think they see this as potentially being highly utilized by pedestrians that use the B-Walt eventually, stopping, get a coffee, and then sitting on the patio and potentially continuing on, or getting a coffee and just taking a short walk could be something that's attractive. So we did want to include that that connectivity. The easement that is going to be required, and looking at this further, I I think we did omit an area as well. But it's basically the entire frontage of the property to the west of the coffee shop. There's a large wetland area. And then the B-Walt is kind of proposed hugging the property line just south of Route 9. So I have it delineated as like a 10,600 square foot area that will require an easement from the property owner. There will also be an easement in the crossing area, which isn't shown here. And I know there were comments from the Trails Committee or I'm not sure the name of the committee, but it was the Trails Committee. They mentioned the crossing potentially being reconfigured to avoid like a 90-degree angle. I'm not sure if that's going to be included in the 75% design or what, but there will be some sort of easement in this area as well.
So there's going to be a sidewalk that's going to run down Park Street, essentially?
It's going to be a trail. I think it's a paved trail, I believe.
Paved trail. I mean, I'm thinking about pedestrians. If they're going to take the crosswalk, then obviously they're going to need to walk down. They're not going to be walking in the parking lot itself. They're going to have to walk down Park Street. And then you've got a crossing there
Yep.
to get into the, essentially to get into the coffee shop itself. You've got a proposed crosswalk there. So they're crossing from the other side of the street, and then, as with the B-Walt, then go down there, and they could continue on the B-Walt or go to the left into the coffee shop.
Correct. And I also, in this preliminary design, there's a little sidewalk on to the south of the property that kind of ends at the furthest south driveway.
Right.
We'll be connecting into that as well and putting a crosswalk across our driveway. So anyone traveling north from any of the residential homes.
Okay, so you're going to run it all the way the length of the property, essentially, along Park Street. I mean, there will be a sidewalk type thing.
We'll be proposing the sidewalk to the south of the driveway. Everything shown here in red is part of the B-Walt.
Right, but everything south of that
Would be us, yeah.
sidewalk that you'll put in.
About, yeah, it's like 25 feet or so. Correct.
Mark?
Yeah, so right now, there's no sidewalk up to that crosswalk that you pointed out as kind of the main activity crosswalk?
There's no sidewalk, no.
And you're not proposing to extend the crosswalk up to there? I mean, the sidewalk up to there? Because the B-Walt's a few years away. I mean,
We could,
I hope, right?
if that was something that was designed, I would hate to
Well, I'm just curious how
waste
people
money.
walking
Yeah.
from, the neighborhood, are they just going to stop in a sidewalk and kind of navigate their way through the parking lot? Or they're going to have a sidewalk up to that little crosswalk that takes you into the Starbucks, right?
I suppose, yeah, right.
There and there.
I suppose, I'm not sure if, I suppose a sidewalk should be proposed to at least that connection point.
I would think at least up to, so people can get into the coffee shop.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something
Yeah,
we
if you
could,
want to build it to B-Walt standards, I'm good, but I don't think that's what we're asking.
okay, just a sidewalk. Yeah.
The other question is, so I know you're in preliminary discussions with the state, and you had said that maybe you can't really get anything changed until you have an approval as far as like a deceleration lane or acceleration lane. But if in fact that deceleration lane was created, you're suggesting that the B-Walt easement is that purple shaded area?
Correct.
Would that deceleration lane require us to have an easement on the actual corner? In other words, you're suggesting right now that the B-Walt's going to end up in the right-of-way of Route 9, right, Turnpike Road?
Yeah, in this location, just the west of the dumpster.
Okay, but if a deceleration lane is put in, will we have enough room to put the B-Walt and a deceleration lane?
I haven't run through that design.
Right, so I'm just wondering if that easement needs to be, again, it looks to me like you have space between the bypass lane and,
I think they
way.
offset the B-wall, I think it's 12 feet off the bypass, I could be mistaken. So between the curb line of the bypass and the edge of,
I guess I'm just asking if we need that 12 feet to put the B-wall in, is it going to be there?
I think, I mean, obviously, I don't think right up against the curb line is a wise idea, and I think the alternative layout kind of,
I mean, I think this is, I think the acceleration lane and the deceleration lane is a state problem. There's not much the town can do to force that.
right, you're just making sure there's enough room if it were to
But
ever.
if they do put that in, and I hope they do someday, soon, are we going to have room to run that B-wall, or are we going to need to go back to this owner and ask him for some more space?
Could there be language included in the easement itself that addresses that?
I don't know what the solution is. I just want to know that, because right now, all there is a breakdown lane,
Correct.
and I don't know exactly how far that right-of-way extends into this site, whether there's a deceleration lane would need to be
X amount of feet.
X amount of feet, I don't
Yeah.
know, let's say 12 feet, right? And then you have another 12 feet before you get to the bypass lane. I don't want to build the B-wall and then have the state come in and put a deceleration lane and have this like competition between the B-wall and a deceleration lane.
If I may,
Go ahead.
I did reach out to our District 3 with MassDOT, and I sent them the draft plan and also just the preliminary plan for this project to ask about the concept of a deceleration or acceleration lane and what we would need to do to get one in that area, regardless of this project, so that they could look at that. But part of the B-wall will most likely be a review by MassDOT, and I can definitely get that feedback to our consultant as well.
Okay, so
I guess the answer-
you understand the ask there? Like if we
Yeah.
don't, I don't want to ask for anything we don't need, but I also don't want to have to chase it, down the road if we are going to need it.
I think,
The other, before I get too far along that, and I'm sorry, there was a suggestion at the last meeting from a resident about turning turning south behind the building, following the wetlands down to the southern boundary,
Yep.
and then going out to Park Street with the B-wall.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not feasible, or is it?
So we-
Again, I don't know what, the ATSC probably has some thoughts on that too, but.
I did look at it preliminarily after that call, and so the design requirements for that they're designing the B-wall to aren't really conducive to hard 90-degree turns, except at crossings, because they're assuming bikers or walkers will kind of decelerate at a slower speed so you can stop and take a 90-degree turn. The 60-foot radius, it's pretty impactful to the rear of the property.
Right.
It would I'm not going to say it's unfeasible, but it's certainly impactful to the rear of the property and as well as the
Okay.
southern property line.
That was my fear, but,
Yeah. I'm not to say
just wanted to make sure you explored it.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's all of my questions for now.
No questions on that.
Then I'd like to open this. Have you finished your presentation, or?
Yeah, I can, and I guess to answer your initial question, I think the applicant would be open if it needed to be shifted a couple feet further onto the property, or, I mean, the easement's on this property anyway, if it was instead of 2 feet, 4 feet, or 6 feet, I think he would be open to that if there was any improvements to the state, but obviously we'll cross that bridge when it presents itself.
Okay, and you think, and then as far as bringing the sidewalk up to a safe
Yeah,
access
we can have
point
that
to
on the
to
revised
Starbucks?
plans.
Yeah, okay.
So it will be a sidewalk kind of south of the driveway, a crossing, and then a sidewalk up to this connection.
Exactly.
And then again, I'm reserving some of my asks for after the
Peer review.
peer review comes in, so but those seem obvious to me.
Okay. It looks like there's a driveway or a sidewalk that goes right to the first driveway on the southern
the other
side of the
side?
property line.
Yeah, you can see it here, this little square, see that little square, or rectangle, I guess?
Yeah,
That's the end of the sidewalk. And then there is a 4-foot wide, maybe, asphalt sidewalk on the easterly side of Park Street too. So having that connection point to here would, I think, is a good idea.
Looks like you would just
I think
pave
it's
the
actually on
gravel
both
areas.
sides.
Is it?
I'm on Google Maps, although I'm
looks
sure
like, yeah, it is
someone
on
could
both
answer
sides.
that
Well,
question.
I'm just trying to figure out which of those sidewalks goes down Park Street, because I
both go down Park
drove.
Both do.
Well, not the whole length of Park Street. I'm just trying to figure out where I know there's a crossing
So it looks like,
about halfway down Park Street.
There's several, it kind of,
It goes down the east side of Park Street.
yes,
It
there are
stops on the west
two
side.
until the next.
Okay, so people
Intersection.
coming up Park Street are going to be on the east side of Park Street, and at some point, they would have to cross Park Street to get to the Starbucks.
Correct.
Okay.
And there's a crosswalk right before,
the residential development to the south.
yeah.
Yeah.
there's one there.
Okay, good.
It's probably, I think it's 200 feet to the south of the property.
Yeah,
It might be on this aerial, actually. It's,
I know there's another crossing quite a bit further down that doesn't have a crosswalk.
right, it's, if you look at the screen, it's,
Right.
yeah, so it's between the parking and the residential development. I guess it's closer than 200 feet. So I think continuing to your point, up the westerly side, across the driveway to the connection point is
Okay.
something.
Okay.
do you have anything else, Mr. Manafort?
No, that was it for tonight. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but I assume the next meeting will have a lot more answers and resolution to the traffic and the stormwater and such.
And I'd like to open the public hearing to any questions from the audience that we have here. I would ask that we did hear a number of suggestions last week at our last hearing, and I think we have tried to address some of those. If there are new or further information which you'd like to bring to the applicant and to the planning board, we'd be glad to listen to it. I ask that you keep your presentation under 2 minutes, and that when you introduce yourself, please spell your last name for us. Is there anyone who wishes to comment tonight? Yes, sir.
Under 2 minutes.
Okay.
Wayne Webster, 3 Essex Way. Appreciate the move to make this a more usable spot. What we have here, and I'm not a developer, is a very high volume business. We wouldn't be operating from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. We wouldn't have all this queuing and all of this problem with traffic on this lot. So we have a proposed very high volume business on a lot that just doesn't fit a very high volume business. And I think that's why we're struggling so much with it. I keep looking at it and say, where do you put the building? Well, we have an existing building to the left, to the west, that kind of bogs down this lot. Park Street is very narrow, very difficult. So we continue at Walker Meadow to be concerned about the traffic on Park Street, to be concerned about that bogging down, especially during the peak hours, but really concerned about the hours of operation and how this lot will be full all the time and very busy, and it really isn't built for that. It's just too small. I think Starbucks are great. It's just the wrong business on the wrong spot. And that's about all we have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir? Over here.
Ed Burdick, 11 Essex Way. We've got a couple of points. Because I drive this all the time, I have friends who refuse to turn onto Park Street off of Route 9 because when you get to Park Street, it's maybe 3 parking places wide. It's really, really quite narrow. And the reason I'm able to make that is because I can see all the way up Park Street, because there's no buildings there. So when I come down and I look over there, I see, is there a car coming the other direction? If there is, I slow down even more. I'm never more than 15 miles an hour when I make that turn. That means any cars behind me have to slow down. And I actually start making that turn basically at the Mill Street exit. I start signaling, I start making sure that I start slowing down so the cars behind me will know that I'm making the turn, even if they're ignoring my signal. And that crosswalk right there, maybe 100 and some feet from Route 9, I would not dare to cross at that crosswalk because I know there's traffic coming in. And the traffic sometimes comes in really hot because they're coming down from 60 miles an hour. And so that's just on the ground. I'm there all the time. I live 1,000 feet from Route 9 backing up to Park Street. I see stuff, I drive it. And just realistically, that's a tiny, tiny road. Going from 60 to 15 is just, I mean, without an acceleration lane, deceleration lane, all that stuff, I just don't see how this is feasible. The last thing I want to say is, if that queue backs up to the point that it spills onto Park Street, that just compounds the whole situation. And if you're going to have a going business there and it's very successful, I expect that back up. Thanks.
Thank you.
If I could just,
Sure.
but just so the speed limit, I believe, on Route 9 is 55, and the Park Street speed limit is 25. And then I did want to mention, so the queue, the reconfigured driveway, it actually increases the drive-through queue. So obviously the on-site queue exceeds 15 if there was a looped configuration or whatnot. In the drive-through lane, though, there is 15 queue, which exceeds the town's site plan review regulations for the number of vehicles from the order point, or before the order point and between the order point and the pickup window. I think the required is 12 total, so we have 15.
So actually, the replacement of the driveways increases the amount of space in which you can have the drive-through lane.
In the actual lane by
Right,
one vehicle, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
My name is Phil McDowell. I live at 9 Quaker Way. I have two issues. I assumed that the numbered cars that we see on that screen is one lane of a two-lane counterclockwise flow of cars. Is that correct?
Yep. There's a drive-through lane and a dedicated bypass.
Well, the point I want to make is that eastbound traffic on Route 9 will be seeing headlights to their right because of those two lanes. And I don't know if you've ever driven on a road like Route 9 and see headlights coming at you. It's quite dangerous. I don't want to give you the answer, which is do the whole thing counterclockwise, or clockwise rather than counterclockwise. But that's the planning board's call. But there's something really dangerous when you have headlights coming right at you, and they're right at your right when they should be at your left. The other issue I have is I live in Walker Meadow. Walker Meadow has one exit to the rest of the world. It's on Park Street. Walker Meadow is an over 55 community. There are a lot of elderly people that live there. That really implies a lot of ambulance traffic. And I hate to imagine what will happen when Park Street and Milk Street gets clogged because of this coffee shop, that they won't be able to get out. Thank you.
Can I ask the applicant a question? Regarding traffic lights, it looks like from Google Earth or Google Maps that Route 9 is elevated compared to the site.
Yeah.
So is it anticipated that headlights, are you going to make it to Route 9 on that drive-through?
No, so headlights are typically 2 to 3.5 feet above on a typical sedan or vehicle, 2 to 3.5 feet above the ground. So they're, I mean, relatively low. There's like, the grade change actually, as you go west, it's more significant. The coffee shop is kind of going to be depressed off Route 9. And then as well, the B-Walt will eventually be between the coffee shop and this red dash line here. You can see it kind of along it's actually, I think they're proposing to mount it on the guide rail that's existing. It's going to be a snow fence, so some sort of mesh fence to kind of prevent I believe when the plows come by, any snow or debris impacting the B-Walt. So I think that will further shield the visibility from, or the impact of light. But there is a grade change of between 2 and, as you get further west over here, it's, I think, 6 to 8 feet, really. I mean, anyone that was on the site walk too, you might remember the Route 9 does slope down, yeah.
Is there anyone else in the audience that'd like to make a comment? Yes, ma'am.
This down a little bit. I'm Paula, last name is Young, Y-O-U-N-G, 11 Stagecoach Circle. So we only have one exit also onto Park Street, entrance and exit. But my question, I guess, is you said
Could
something
you
about
hold the microphone a little closer?
Okay,
You're-
sorry.
Thank you.
What is the criteria that you'll be using in the, making the decision? And you mentioned that it was a special permit, so I didn't know what that all meant. So, thank you.
Jenny?
So it's a site plan review. The restaurant itself is a use that's allowed by right without a special permit. However, because it has a drive-through component, that requires a special permit from the planning board. So special permits are discretionary permits where the planning board can decide that if they don't meet specific findings based on the requirements in the bylaw, they don't have to approve it. But a site plan review, they just have to meet the site plan review standards and regulations.
Are there any other questions from anyone in the audience? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Dan Azariti, Sheffield Way, number 1 in Walker Meadow. And I don't want to beat this thing. I use Park Street often. And my wife cringes every time we go Route 9 East to turn on the Park Street or exit Park Street to turn on the Route 9 East. Within the past, I think, year, there have been 2 serious accidents at Park Street and Route 9 with cars heading east. And I believe one was a rollover. And that's without additional traffic. So I'm just asking the board, and I don't know whether you can mitigate all the risk, but ask the board to realize that you're going to have increased risk. You're going to have increased risk of accidents, cars going down. Speed limit's 55, no one does 55. And turning on to Park Street, and then you have cars turning on to Park Street from Route 9 East, and then you're going to have cars exiting Starbucks, making that left-hand turn on Park Street. So my biggest concern is safety and traffic flow.
Thank you. This is one of the reasons we've asked for a peer review on the traffic,
Good, thank
which
you.
is one of the things we're waiting for at the moment.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from anyone in the audience? We will be continuing this hearing to the first week in January, is that correct?
The second one, January 21st.
7th. What?
21st.
January 21st. And by then, we will have gotten the peer review, and if there are any other comments or questions that people have, please send them to the planning board or deliver them there, and we'll be glad to review them ourselves as a planning board. have our planner review them, and they will be forwarded to the applicant. So thank you all for attending tonight.
I'll make a motion to continue this hearing to January 21st.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
We still have a meeting, so if you guys could please keep the talking to a minimum and go outside when you do that, please.
Do we have any minutes? Jenny, perhaps you could give us an update?
My update?
Yeah, I think that's where we are on the agenda.
No, we have the.
Well, we have the rules and regulations.
I have to admit, I haven't reviewed them all thoroughly. I have looked at them. My basic question, I guess, is on the regulations regarding section 6.2, the highway business. I still get confused by reading them as on this whole point system. And is there something visual that we can add to the regulations that, I don't know, make it a little easier to read? I mean, I understand what you're doing and so on and so forth, but as I said, I have to go back and forth, and I still get confused looking at this point system and how it's actually going to work. So that's kind of my basic comment that I got from taking a look at this, and I will look at it more thoroughly.
Yeah, I can't think of a way to put it in visually. We did provide some examples at the end for like a payment of a fee in lieu of making the modifications. I'd have to think about that. From the top, off the top of my head, I can't think of a way to, provide an example visually.
I'm just not sure, as I said, I need to look at it myself a little more thoroughly to see whether, I as a novice am coming in to look at this, and I sort of look at it and I just was having trouble working it out. So that was my comment kind of generally on that.
Okay. So are we talking about the highway business regulations first, or I just want to keep them separate, or the planning board rules and regulations?
Well, let's do the highway business first and then
Okay.
the rules and regulations.
Are we taking comments?
Yep.
For the example 1 and example 2, I'm assuming the A is area.
Yes.
Can we put area? Because like A gross, A proposed, like it's kind of hard to read sometimes. I was like, wait, what's a gross? What's a I don't know what that means.
Well, that's what I meant.
Or if we did like, because you have the dollar sign for the fee, like that makes sense. But if we did
Only 3 extra letters, we can do that.
Yeah.
something like
I
that.
am very thankful that a knowledgeable engineer came up with this, and it wasn't me, but I understand that.
Or even if we just say gross area, net area, proposed area, area of public benefit amenity.
Okay,
It does, now that you said that, it does seem very engineering.
yes, yeah. So you want to change it to gross area then?
It doesn't, it doesn't have to be that. I'm just saying if we do a gross, a net, a public benefit amenity, somebody's gonna say, well, what's the public benefit amenity? It says a public benefit amenity. What does that mean? Like, you know what I mean?
Okay. I think it was, I'm thinking the reasoning was because it has a formula.
And that's fine. If you want to, with the formula, maybe just put area, parentheses, A.
Okay.
If we want to keep that formula.
Yeah, it's interesting because a public benefit amenity, is that supposed to be area as well?
Yes. It's the area of the public
Because
benefit amenity.
a public benefit amenity could
The,
be like
yeah, so the
something
public,
besides an area,
Area,
like,
yeah.
right, so the public benefit amenity is,
Described in section 1 above.
right, I'm just going into the example.
Here it is, page 1. Public benefit.
I thought that would be, I don't, yeah, I'm a little confused now. Yeah. Because I think a public benefit amenity was intended to be like putting in a playground or,
Right, it is, and it's the point system, so I will have to get back to you on that, because now I'm confused.
I feel like this is the open space.
Okay,
Like a,
yeah, I see your point.
I'm sure there's a reason.
It's
and-
more of a sending parcel kind of concept like we have in the transit village than in a public benefit amenity. It's more, like, I'm fine with the concept of a non-contiguous open space
Right.
parcel.
Or
but-
a public benefit amenity, which could be something else. So,
Right.
the question is that it needs to kind of be,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure it makes sense, and you're going to sit down after this meeting and say, oh, now I know how to explain it. But
Right, no, you're,
if
you
we
guys
can't
are
think about it
absolutely
right now,
right,
it probably
yeah.
needs to just be written in a
Right.
different way.
Right. Okay.
other comments?
On this, I don't think so.
I would say, everybody take one more look at it, and any comments pass on to Jenny. I will do the same, and we can take a look at this at our next meeting.
Okay.
All right, on to the planning board procedural rules and regulations.
So, as you know, the items in here, at least as it pertains to the site plan review, are already existing. They're just in a separate document. So this combines the regulations for special permits and site plan review, and then adds just the procedural requirements for the planning board. Typically, a planning board would have these regulations more so for the public to understand the process, but also so that you have, what your requirements are in writing. A lot of it is referencing Mass General Law, but I think it's good to also have it in your regulations so that you know what you're following.
And because they're just rules and regulations, they can be changed by the planning board, added to or revised at any time. Is that correct?
Correct, and they do not need to go to town meeting for approval, but this is a public hearing.
The thing that, I just quite frankly started to review this, but under meetings, I just on that second paragraph, the procedure we follow is not actually the procedure that's in there. So, because what you've said is public hearings, the beginning, the followed review and action on meeting minutes. Normally we don't do our meeting minutes until we get to the end or we do things. So I just would like to see if, take the procedure we're presently following and make sure that the procedure which is in here is the one that we're presently following. It's minor, but it's,
Okay.
Yeah, so I had made some suggestions to Jenny today. It was kind of late for her to get them out to everybody.
okay.
I don't necessarily know if I want to go, do you want me to go through those, or how do you want to deal with it?
if this saved correctly when you were on the phone with me, then I should have them in here and I can go through them. If you want.
Yeah, I can go through them as well, but I'd rather have, I know you were getting some answers on a couple of things, so I'd rather have you do it.
Okay.
Maybe the thing to do then is to put them in, and then any other changes that people have, and also put this off till, I would say, January, probably.
Okay, I just have a
in our
couple of
schedule.
questions.
Yeah.
So I know the changes to make.
Yeah, if you give us a red line change or something.
That'd be great.
I mean, whatever you
Oh,
think.
yes.
Yeah.
But I mean questions right now,
understand.
just to answer.
Did you send a revised version out?
No, not of this.
So I made one comment, just in the, now I lost it. In the pre-application meeting, we say it's required, but there's no way to enforce that, in my view. So I had mentioned to Jenny, maybe considering the application is not considered complete until that pre-application meeting is held, as a way to enforce that.
Okay, I had a similar question, so that's good. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Like Mark said, he had a
I
similar.
had more than one, though, so she's going to have to get those out. But she had, some of the things I had, I think we had to make a decision on, so why don't, before she can send us out a revised copy, she has to ask us a couple of questions, and we have to maybe debate that. Or
Okay.
make a decision what we want. Am I understanding that?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the questions was for, under section B4, elections. So I know that the board had talked about electing a chair and a vice chair annually. And last year, I guess still this year, it was in April. And Mark had the suggestion to add the verbiage for making it the first meeting following annual town meeting, which would be in the spring. So I just wanted to see if everyone agrees with that.
That should be fine. See, March is usually the election.
Well, right,
Early
but the
March.
election has to be ratified
Ratified,
at town
that's
meeting.
what I'm saying.
And the reason I
It's-
suggested
yeah.
that is because if we do have a new member, I think they should have the opportunity to have a say in who the chair is, right?
That's fine,
With the exception
Yeah.
of Chris.
yeah,
Speaking of that, nomination papers are out, so.
so that, yeah, that makes
Sign if
perfect
you're ready.
sense.
I appreciate that.
Anything else?
That might have been it, actually. Oh, the other question was about under section D for limited site plan review on page 10. So right now, how the regulations are for limited site plan review is that an applicant cannot apply for multiple within 5 years. And Mark had that question also. So do we want to lower that threshold, keep it the same? Limited site plan reviews that we typically see are for if someone is adding or taking away 5 parking spots or less, or adding a small addition, 2,500 square feet or less. That's when it triggers a limited site plan review, which is a staff-only review. It's issued by the building commissioner.
I mean, I'd like to see it reduced, just because I think that particularly if it's a minor type of thing, it'd be too bad to be stuck with the 5 years on it. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
That was my point, is if
Yeah,
you
that's
come in
too far, right.
to add 2 parking
Yeah.
spaces, all of a sudden, you've got to wait 5 years. And if you decide to do a 200 square foot freezer addition or whatever, you have to go through the whole.
Right, which doesn't
full
make sense
site
for-
plan review
no.
process, which I just think is, I understand the rationale behind it. We don't want people circumventing the site plan process by doing, piecemeal.
Well, the other thing is that you encourage people to follow the rules if they're not so rigorous that they're not going to do it. So, I mean, you want the rules to be reasonable that people are trying to follow, and so a shorter period of time would make sense in this. I mean, no reason to make it that long as far as that goes. I had questions on that limited site plan review also, but I will send those to Jenny. I was a little, the thing I don't want is the planning board and the building commissioner coming to odds on things. I mean, in other words, there have been a couple of situations where, for example, COs have been delivered that we as a planning board were unaware of. And so, and the project may not have fulfilled all the planning board things that they were supposed to do. And I want to make sure that there's enough coordination, we don't run into this problem again, which I do feel has sometimes been a problem. So I would like to see some language in this which kind of addresses that problem to make sure that, you know, the planning board isn't tripping over the feet of the building department, and at the same time that we're getting all the information that we actually need, are kept abreast of things that are going on. You know, Jenny, you're not often, I mean, for example, the building department doesn't come to you and say, okay, we're issuing building permits, you know, or COs on things. You
Well,
know,
I sign off on the COs if there is one, but I mean,
right, but
we haven't had any recently except
one
for
of the
writings.
one of the problems has been something called temporary COs. And that's something that I'm not sure, I never figured out why or how they were issued, but we did run into a problem with those in one of our developments where temporary COs were delivered, you know, houses were able to be sold, people moved in, and things were not completed. So
Yeah, my understanding is we do
prefer that
not
not
issue those
happening.
anymore. I don't know when,
Okay.
not in my time have we issued one, but I agree.
yeah, okay. So that kind of, as I was looking at limited site plan review, that also came to my mind as far as these temporary COs.
Okay.
I have a question on the limited site plan reviews. If staff feels like that's being abused by someone, can they choose to upgrade it to a full site plan review?
Yes, the building commissioner is able to send it to full site plan
So in other
review.
words, if we get 3 limited site plan review applications from the same person in 6 months, there's an opportunity there to.
Right. And I review them too. It's, you know, the building commissioner issues the permit, so to speak, but he reviews it in conjunction with myself, engineering, conservation. So it's a similar process. It's just not a formal hearing in front of the planning board.
Well, I think as much as the formal hearing before the planning board, I think it's the notice to abutters. A limited site plan review doesn't require that, right?
No, because it's such a low
That's
threshold.
something that becomes problematic for me. Like, I have faith in staff to do a site plan review, but it's the lack of notice that really bothers me, because we wouldn't hear from abutters what their issues were, and staff wouldn't hear those issues, so.
Yeah, I think the thought is that the threshold is so low. I mean, it's less than 6 parking spots and
Right.
the 2,500 square feet. But yeah, I mean, if there was something that came forward that we thought this should absolutely go to full site plan review, we usually address that at our staff, the one-stop for business meetings that we have, and we'll discuss it at that point.
I'd just like to make a suggestion on the limited site plan review timing thing. I think we can reduce it from 5 years. I would say maybe make it 2 or 3 years, but then we could add a sentence that says, the planning board may waive this restriction upon request of the applicant. And that way, if we have a 2-year, 3-year limit, they can only do it once every 2 years, but then they come in and they're like, I don't want to do a full site plan. They can petition us and we can say, yeah, make a determination without a hearing that they can go do the limited site plan, and then we waive that requirement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite frankly like that kind of a language. I'd like to give the planning board the opportunity to change or revised, depending on the applicant, perhaps that may be a time when you want to make a different decision on these things. And I'd like the planning board to have the flexibility to be able to do things like that. So I think anywhere we have this kind of qualifying language where the planning board can make a decision to reduce or increase conditions is very valuable.
So is 3
That's
years
my
the number that you all are suggesting?
I'm fine with 2 years.
I would
2
say
years?
2.
Okay, and then there's something else. Nothing else on the actual regulations, and then we have the contents of the application, which, so I met with many different departments, conservation, engineering, fire department, and we talked about what we ask for to be on the site plan. So this is really intended to be a more comprehensive list for the applicant, so that when we get their application, there shouldn't be many items that we have to ask for in addition to what they have submitted. And then one of the new items is the development impact statement, which has become more common for towns to ask for. So a statement pertaining to the impact to different items, including the infrastructure, transportation, natural environment, stormwater, housing and economy, the school system, things like that, because it really helps us to plan when we have that information and we know the impact from that project. And then the last attachment is for the general site development standards and guidelines. So that's, some of this was already existing, but most of it is new. So this, again, is a lot of what we look at, and we did talk to many different departments. And then I know at one of the meetings we had, sidewalks became a topic of discussion. So we found some very good language from another town, and we added it in there.
Another town named Hopkinton.
So the design standard, meaning that we want them to put it in, they're required to provide the sidewalks. That's in there, but the planning board can approve an alternate provision. So it's good language.
I guess I'd sort of like to see something where, as far as the design standards go, that the design review board get involved in some of these things. I mean, I do think it's important to have their input on various design projects that we get. I'm thinking specifically of the new one in the shopping center down at where Tatnick is, and the new one that's going in there. Right. I mean, I think that's something that should go to the design review board to take a look at. I mean, we have just accepted, there's a difference between kind of looking at it from a site plan review and then looking at it from a design review as to whether it isn't, it works with the surrounding buildings and so forth. I really would like the design review board to have some review, or at least be able to look at these plans along with us, because the whole point of the design review board is to look at the design of things. We don't look at the design of a building for aesthetic reasons, but
All we usually have is concept, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So I would like to see something that allows us, when plans come in for a large-scale development like that, to be able to have the design review board review these.
The only thing with that is that that's a requirement in the zoning bylaw. So we would have to go to town meeting and change the bylaw to what the design review board reviews. Right now, they review the trans-oriented village developments and then anything within 2,500 feet of the rotary. And I'm probably missing one. I think it's also maybe the senior living overlay. I'd have to check on that.
So, you mean we couldn't just ask that some language put in there that the planning board could ask for an opinion from? I mean, in other words, I don't want to have to send this all to town meeting to change, but I would think that the design review board would have,
You could add them as a review, like a reviewer for when the application comes in, and they could make a comment at that
Okay,
time.
just-
Typically, they don't have a full design or anything, but
right.
I think
mean,
that
I'd
would be
like to
fine.
see something, because I think it is important if we're going to get more of these projects that are going to be, I mean, that's a large project, and it's going to be visually, it's going to impact that whole area. And I really would like to have had more of an opportunity from a design point to review something like that, which is not the job of the planning board generally.
Yeah, I have to agree with Hazel to some degree. I don't want to put another obstacle in place, but normally when we, as a board, review a site plan or special permit, there's really no concrete building plan or design in front of us. I think, it's nice to say within 2,500 feet of the rotary, but I'd hate to see, I don't know,
So we can add,
I'm trying to think of a worst-case scenario that somebody comes in and builds a really ugly building or something, but,
so we can't require them to go in front of the design review board for a formal meeting without changing the zoning bylaw and going through town meeting. I can add them as a reviewer, but most of the time, the developer does not have the architectural plans prepared at the point of the planning board, because that's an investment, that's a risk for them to take, to pay the money to hire an architect and do the architectural plans when there's so many changes that are happening during the planning board site plan review. So that's just something to consider. It would be difficult.
Yeah, but most time the architect, they come in with these drawings, for example. On any of these, people will come in with a concept plan of how the buildings are going to look.
Yeah, so the design review board could make suggestions that say they want a specific architecture considered, or something like that.
Just, I'd like to see some overseeing on that. Maybe it's going to reach a point where, as you said, I don't want another stumbling block. I don't want them to have to go to another thing to be looked at. But at the same time, I think for the way the streetscape is going to look in our community, I think this is very important, and it's really a very small portion of our town which design review looks at.
So Hazel, would it be better to, and not as part of this, as part of this, include design review board as a commenter?
Yeah.
But then as the next step, revise the map of what the jurisdiction of the design review board is to actually do street frontage on the streets that we care about the design of the buildings, rather than just 2,500 feet of the rotary.
Yeah.
So I think that's the next step.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, and I think going to the town, it may be worthwhile to do this.
yeah, just as an example, like we have this project at 210 Turnpike, and we're all envisioning, a Starbucks there, right? Because we're led to believe that. But if we approve this site plan, there is absolutely nothing to say that it couldn't be a different tenant with a different concept of colors and building styles and.
But do we care?
No, do we care?
I know we care about the
well,
design
I
of the
think
buildings, but on Route 9, it's a coffee shop. Are they going to build something that's so hideous that it's going to be offensive to the town? I don't want to get too far into designing buildings for people, because then that is going the opposite direction, which is just as bad. I think people who are going to design buildings for their businesses are going to do it in an attractive way because they want to attract business. They're not going to do these hideous things. So
I'd stay off Route 9, and I think we're more interested at this point in the center and the
historic.
surrounding non-Route 9 area to look at things like this.
Yeah.
And it's only going to be commercial?
Yeah.
We're not gonna
Oh, no,
limit
we're not going to tackle, no,
Yeah.
you can't.
Instead of restating locations, would it make sense to add language saying at the discretion of the board? Because, you know, I think we're talking about that part of Lyman only because we know that something's happening on that part of Lyman, but if it wasn't, would we include it, right? So I wonder if it makes sense to add language saying.
Well, I mean, when you say, like, we're not going to do Route 9, well, if we do it at town meeting, we have to do either the whole highway business or not, right? Because that.
For what?
Well, because that Lyman project is in.
But for what? To change what the jurisdiction of the design review
Required
board?
design review.
I don't think we have. It doesn't have to go by zoning district. You could have a separate map that's design review board
That's true.
jurisdiction
It's
that
not
just,
currently by
makes the
zoning.
frontage of certain roads that.
Yeah, no, that's
are
true.
subject to it.
It's not currently by zoning district.
So I think a map, would be very useful in making the decision on that basis. But anyway, it's just something I was thinking about.
So to Chris's point, does it make sense to put a clause in there that says, at the discretion of the board, they may elect to send an application to the design review board if it meets certain criteria, like if it
I
meets
think,
certain parameters? I don't know. I would have to
Could
think
we
about
make
that.
it a condition of approval? In other words, we're usually approving the site plan long before they're ready with design. Can we say in a condition, as a condition of site plan approval, that we're going to require design review approval?
Well, yeah, but then you don't want them to be in a situation where they're going to have to get architectural drawings. I mean,
No, but that would be post-site plan, exactly. I mean, they're going to have to get our architectural drawings in order to build it.
At some point, right, to build.
So what I'm saying is that as a condition of occupancy or as a condition of building permit, we say you can't get a building permit until you've submitted, until you've received an approval from design review
I
board.
mean, I think we could do that. The issue I see with that is everything I've heard from developers and, anyone who's experts in permitting or whatever it is the more predictable you can make the process for an applicant, the better it's going to be. So if we're keeping that in our pocket and saying, oh, we might hit you with a design review board condition, like that's going to potentially throw people off. If they know they have to go for a design review board going into the process, it's going to be more predictable. And I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying that would be my hesitance.
So why don't we, I guess,
Why don't we think about it?
why don't you ask the design review board to
I
come
think
up with a
Hazel's ready to go.
proposed, location, proposed map. What'd you say, John?
I think Hazel's ready to go.
I mean, we certainly could discuss this at the next design review board meeting and see what they come up with on this and discuss. I mean, I have not raised it with the design review board because I really didn't think about it until I started to read this. And then I thought, well, I'd kind of like to see a design component in some of this. And it certainly could be brought to the design review board to look at.
Yeah, it just would have to be a change in the zoning. Because
Right.
the zoning's very specific about the
But
jurisdiction.
I think actually that's the kind of thing that the town probably would, I can't see that being turned down by the town because it's really only for the benefit of the streetscape that we have here, which everyone's looking at anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all the questions I have, so we can continue it to the January meeting.
There's a question. Are you here for a particular matter?
I was just listening, and I was actually here for the original Steve Benacasa thing.
Okay, all right. Thank
I
you.
missed it.
All right.
I'm from offline, just going to sign it now.
Okay. We're always welcome to have visitors. All right, is there anything else on these at the moment? At the moment, it looks like we'll send these back to be looked at, and I would suggest we put this off till January. At the moment, I think we
Okay.
can look at the December, we're looking at, I'm going to jump ahead slightly to upcoming meeting dates. Mark has said that he will not be available on the 17th of December. We have one thing, we adjourned to that, and I wonder whether we could move that to January 7th.
Which was,
There was one thing that tonight
It was a request.
a request.
oh, the request for the writings to look at the waivers, so.
Yeah, could we request the applicant that be moved till January?
Yes.
Because I think if that's the only thing on the meeting at this point, being in the holiday season, if we don't need to have a meeting of anything that really needs to be discussed, we could wait and discuss this in January.
Okay.
Would that be agreeable with the board?
I move we continue the hearings for the Highway Business District and the Planning Board regulations to January 7th. Correct. I guess, yeah. Hazel, do you want to ask if there's public
Right.
comment?
Is there any comment on the high revised planning board rules and regulations and the Westborough zoning bylaw highway business? Is there anyone here for that, to make public comment on it? If not, I will
second John's motion. Sorry.
motion to continue. Thank you. All right, are we ready to vote? All in favor? Thank you. Jen, thank you for all the work you did on this. I really think it'll
Yeah.
allow us to run smoother, and I think any developers coming to town will now have an easier way to see their way through the rules and regulations. Did you have anything else do you have anything to report to us tonight?
I just have a quick update. So as you know, we're doing the transportation study with WRTA, and they have a public virtual meeting on Thursday night at 7 p.m. The link is on the planning department page, but I can also have it sent out to you all. I'm not sure if Kristen already did that. But they're going to be giving their recommendations that came out of the report. So it should be interesting.
And is that going to be taped? Because
I can't attend. I mean, I can't watch it.
I can ask. I would assume it's recorded, but
It's
we
just
aren't the ones running the meeting.
So that's, there's a pretty big chorus concert Thursday night, so I think
Okay, I'll ask
not just me, but
if
the
we can have
public
the recording.
may want to view the video.
That's 2 nights from tonight, you're saying? This
Yes, Thursday at 7 p.m.
Yeah, I'm not available for that either, so if they
Okay.
can tape it, I'd like to see it.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
that's all I have.
How was the sign meeting?
Oh, I heard it went well. I mean, the second public meeting, we did not have a lot of people in attendance, which was unfortunate. We were hoping for more members of the public, but they will have another meeting where they show their suggestions for the branding and the wayfinding, and so, we'll have that meeting at some point in early '25.
One thought on that, I think there was some confusion in some of the communications from the town on like Facebook, et cetera. I wonder if there's just a better way or a more simplified way to try and help people understand like what it is and why, and also how it's being paid for, since it's grant funded. I know that I heard some just public concerns on what it was and how we're gonna do it.
Yeah, the what it was question was mentioned at the Economic Development Committee meeting this morning, and you're right, people don't understand what wayfinding is in particular, so I'll get that
I was trying to explain it
feedback.
to my wife, and I did a poor job, so.
Yeah, signs.
I understood it at the meeting, but I didn't know how to explain it.
Yeah, did you have a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just heard, and I could have missed.
Could you just identify yourself? That's a requirement.
I'm sorry?
Your
You have to
name?
identify yourself.
Oh, sure, I will.
Yeah, just,
So I'm Viraj. I'm actually one of the home buyers at the Ridings too. And my lot is lot 27, which is the first one, which is in discussion. And I just heard you guys talking about pushing the date out to Jan. Is that what that discussion was about, to basically push it out from December 17th to Jan 7th?
Yes, so it wasn't scheduled for December 17th. That was just our next meeting date that was scheduled. But it sounds like due to availability that we won't be having that meeting. It will be in January.
Oh,
But that is just for the request for the waiver to have a different driveway elevation than is, or slope than is required in our regulations.
got it, got
Is
it.
that
So
going to throw
does
off the
that
closing for the buyers?
I'm sorry?
Are you a buyer?
Yes, I am actually
Okay,
lot 27
This
buyer.
would not affect that aspect of it, I do.
Will
not
it though? Will it
believe.
affect the CO?
So what we, well,
Well, that's why
I
I'm
don't know if we can
here.
even have this discussion now, but,
Yeah.
so we have been in, I don't know if it was you that spoke to our community development director? Okay. But we have been in talks with the developer and all of the other departments about it, and we're trying to figure out what needs to be done to get to that point. It's not just the driveway, there's multiple deficiencies and outstanding items that the developer needs to take care of
And I
before we
think,
can
yeah.
sign the certificate of occupancy.
Right.
I'm-
This is a better discussion with either the building department or the developer, not with the planning board.
No, I understand. What I'm trying to get to is December 17th, there's no meeting, so technically this will definitely be pushed out to Jan.
it could be pushed out further if the developer can't bring some of those issues
To closure.
to satisfaction.
But I would suggest that you talk to the building department or the planning department or the developer himself. As I said, talking to us as a board, we have no control over
Got
these
it.
particular things at the moment.
Got it. No, I was trying to see, because I have a current home that I've rented out, so I need to plan with my
I'm
two
afraid
kids and stuff, where am I going, kind of a thing. So-
gonna
I'm
be no
happy to
help to
meet
you.
with you tomorrow if you
Sure,
would
Jenny,
like.
I'll meet you tomorrow. Thank
Okay.
you. Would you be in this building or? the
Yep,
town?
I'll give you my card.
All right, thank you.
Now, do we have minutes for the 19th? I don't think so, okay. But I saw that.
Reports of other committees? Do you want to do that? Okay, sorry.
I'm happy to meet with you tomorrow.
And reports to the board members of any town committees meetings. John?
We had the Capital Expenditures Planning Committee meeting last night that made the recommendation to the town manager for the budget. And it was recommended that, so this is basically departments
I'll be here.
will put projects up to the town for free cash. We have some free cash that can be used every year. The town manager advised us to keep it under 1.5 million. I think we have more than that, but just to keep the balance at a healthy balance, to keep it below 1.5 million. And we recommended swimming pool repairs for the community center, the Gibbons Middle School gym replacement, middle school gym floor replacement, DPW facility improvements, police vehicle replacement, which is 3 vehicles, Mill Pond School chiller design, utility vehicle replacement, 1-ton vehicle replacement for the DPW, which is also 3 vehicles, district HVAC and plumbing repairs for the schools, and the communications equipment replacement for the fire department. So I think that ended up totaling, I want to say, 1.4 million. And that's not guaranteed, still gets voted on by town meeting, but this now has been recommended to the town manager to go put in the budget and try and figure out how that's going to work. So that's where we're at.
Thank you. I'm really delighted that, you're able to attend the meeting and we get reports on this so that we know what's going on. Makes a difference. All right, are there any other reports for people that attended meetings on behalf of as representatives from the planning board? If not, if there's nothing else before us tonight or anything else people wish to raise, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Oh. All in favor? Thank you very much.
Happy holidays, everybody.
All right, so at this point, we will not have a meeting on the 17th, and our next